Viewer contributions make local programming possible on WNIN. Become a member of WNIN with your contribution so we can continue to make this programming available. Visit WNIN.org and click on the donate button.
Well, again, thank you for having us. My name is John Benton. I'm the Deputy Executive Director at Dream Center Evansville. I'm joined by one of our leaders in the Dream Center Board of Directors, Pat Heck. He's serving as our Interim Executive Director as we go through a leadership transition. We are so happy to share about the Dream Center today. I have a couple stories I want to share with you, a couple data points, but what I really want to focus on today is something I've been hearing as I've been sitting in this room and something I've been noticing. I hear the rotary moments and I hear about what we want to do in the world. And I wanted to begin with this quote that I think anchors where I hope we end up in this conversation. It comes from a thinker, he's a really big thinker from Germany. His name's Jürgen Moltmann. Household name to many, but maybe not in these households. But what Jürgen says is something that it eats at the heart of those doing work in Dream Center. He says, God weeps with us so that we may one day laugh with him. He says, that is why faith, wherever it is developed into hope, causes not rest, but unrest, not patience, but impatience. It does not calm the unquiet heart, but it is itself this unquiet heart in man. That's what he says about faith. And I start there because where I hope we go in this conversation today is Dream Center recognizes itself for its mission. And our mission is rooted deeply in what we think is the call of God into the very hardest parts of our community, carrying in the most precious thing that we can think of, which is the love of God. We think of that as an act of faith, and we want to invite you along into that act of faith with us. It's such a beautiful thing for us to have been invited here about a month or so ago in a moment where we were thinking about what's next for us, and we're thinking we need partners who can come alongside us, who can envision the future of Dream Center Evansville alongside us. And so I'm grateful for this opportunity because it could not come at a better time to invite partners. And so I want to bring you along with me into this journey of faith that we have, this journey where there is not restfulness in the heart, unfortunately. There's unrest to serve and love a weary and difficult world. So as we talk about Dream Center, I do want to begin. Our mission is to share God's love by walking with kids. We start with walking with them from the moment they're born to and through college. We do that not just educationally, but we do it alongside their families. We make sure their families have everything they need. And we go even one step further and we say, what is it that their community can give those families to ensure that kids have everything they would need to be successful? We believe that if we do that over and over again, something powerful will happen. We believe that actually generations will thrive. And it's our aim to see that happen neighborhood after neighborhood in the Evansville area. So as we move into talking about Dream Center today, that's the heartbeat of what we are talking about. We believe that if we do this work, there's only one way for us to do it, and it's through these values. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them, but what I want to say is we believe that if Jesus were actually walking in the shoes of those inside our work at Dream Center, this is what he would do. He would humble himself to walk along with others, not go along. He would prioritize dignity. He would be strategically relentless. He would do everything he can to lift up an excellent program for kids who deserve and have not always gotten what they deserve. We at Dream Center are really excited to talk about a couple things today, but what we are really focused in on in our work is a place. So we focus in on the Jacobsville neighborhood, which some of you likely are familiar with. It's everything that is north of Division Street along the Lloyd Expressway, south of Diamond Avenue, between First Avenue, and we'll say the 41 Garvin area. It's a very large neighborhood. In fact, we often talk about the fact that it has the same population size as Mount Vernon, Indiana, where I grew up. There's the same number of kids. There's very similar racial breakdowns, in fact. So it's like having a small little Mount Vernon, Indiana in our own backyard. But as that small little town in a big city like Evansville, we have found time and time again, there's a story happening in that community that often gets overlooked. And I'd like to invite you into that story. It's in that story that we feel that unrest. It's in that story where we feel that pang of there's something that this world wants to be in the heart of God that is yet to be. And it's that faith that says we won't be able to rest until we start to see it look more like what we think God's calling it to be. And that's what we are going to talk a little bit about today. But before we even go there, I want to introduce you to some of our scholars. So I'm not going to name individual names just because I want to protect their dignity. But I start with these students because the stories I want to share with you are not numbers to us. They are faces with names and stories, hopes and dreams. And I picked this picture in particular because this is a group of individuals who are actually part of a dream club that we have who is regularly talking about what they want to be one day. And it strikes me almost every single time that I go into those rooms, I hear those kids talk. I never hear them talk about the data I'm about to show you. I never hear them talk about how hard it is to live in that neighborhood. I hear about how they want to become doctors. I hear about how they want to become bankers. Some of them still want to be YouTubers. We also see TikTok, but they want to make their life something that matters to the world. They don't care where they're from. They don't care what the story around them is. They care about where they're headed. And I think that they can do that because they finally found a place where they can dream. I think they found a place where they can believe. And I think that safety is opening up something in them that I believe that we can spread across a community. So before we started on this work at Dream Center of walking along kids' cradle to career, we wanted to understand what we were facing. And so I want to invite you to think about an outcome with me. We're really focused at Dream Center on one really big idea. What does it mean to help children move from one station in life to another? And there's a great economist out of Harvard University named Raj Chetty who's really spent the due diligence to help define what that means. He wanted to understand what's behind this idea of the American dream, this idea that you can come to America and you can start here and move up here. And is that really as ubiquitous as the saying is? Does it really happen as often for people as we hear it out loud? So he defined it as a child's chance of moving up in the income bracket compared to their parents. And he began to ask, so how often is this happening? And I want to say that it is as ubiquitous as the saying is. I think we're going to find that there's a different story going on. In Jacobsville, there's really three key points that we're going to talk about. It's the fact that about 1 out of 5 of our adults do not possess a high school graduation or a degree. It's that about 13% have a post-secondary degree compared to the rest of the city. But here's the real kicker, and this is the one that keeps us up at night. It's the seed of unrest for us. It's that in our neighborhood, kids are 70% more likely to drop out of high school than they are to actually go on and complete a college degree. When I think about Raj Chetty's work of asking this question of economic mobility, this does not sound like a population that is predicted to experience it. And we have a lot to say about that, in fact. What we have found is our kids are ones who desperately need economic mobility. What you're seeing here is 2 different groups. One group is on the right, that is Jacobsville. That's the population of youth in our neighborhood. And the group on the left is just Dream Center kids. So what you can see is Dream Center kids are most negatively affected by low income. But in our neighborhood, we see a very small portion of individuals who are living above what we call a living wage. They're not wondering where their next meal is coming from. They don't wonder how they're going to meet that rent check. They have what they need. For everyone else, it's complete economic frustration and despair on a regular basis. We look at that picture, we look at the education picture, and we ask, okay, what is Raj Chetty's work going to tell us? Are our kids likely to make it? Are they likely to experience a life of flourishing and upward mobility and economic advantage? And here's what we find. In our neighborhood, only 10% of kids are expected to actually attain a living wage in adulthood. So this is a bleak story, and I started out with a really hard quote. But I want to return us back to that picture of the kids that we were first introduced to. And I want to think alongside you, what can we do? Because I have a story. If I were to fill this room with the hundreds of elementary school students at Delaware Elementary School today, I could divide the room up in 1/10, and I'd say about 1/10 of them are going to experience a living wage in adulthood. that feeling would be suffocating. And it's a feeling I actually experience because I get to go inside of Delaware often and know these facts and figures. Yet, while we know that's true, I still have kids saying, I want to be a doctor one day, Mr. John. I want to go and I want to be a banker because I've never seen someone who looks like me give out loans. I've never seen someone at the hospital who looks like me who can help me whenever I break my arm or who can clean my teeth. Our kids see the world through a lens of what they want to give to it, not what it's giving to them. And we have a responsibility to surround them with the hope and the belief that they can achieve and break these odds. So what we at Dream Center are about is this really simple idea. We are tired of creating exceptions to the rules in our neighborhood. We are tired of creating these one-off stories. We want to blow up this number of 10%. We want to see this not be a neighborhood where you escape by exception, but because of rule, the poverty that grips the lives and families of our neighborhood. How do we do that? Well, that's what we really want to invite you into today, where we need partners who can think alongside us. So I want to introduce you to what we think is our innovative strategy we call the Jacobsville Promise Pathway. There's a lot of information on the page, so I'm just going to orient us real quick. What you're noticing is 3 different converging strategies asking how do we have a holistic answer to the needs of a child in order to help them become a doctor one day, to become a financier, to become an entrepreneur. We start as early as possible. We've found time and time again, if we can help a child as early as possible be successful at learning to identify their letters, to count, to understand how to raise their hand in the classroom, that starts them off strong when they show up to that first day at kindergarten in Delaware Elementary School. If they can do that, they can begin to gain literacy skills and computational skills and math and everything they would need to begin to build the building blocks of what it takes to experience a strong and vital life. As we go through that journey, we continue to sophisticate our work to make sure kids have what they need every single step of the way because, believe it or not, 5-year-olds are different than 15-year-olds. We've also found, though, you can't stop there. We have found that over and over again, it's our kids who the education isn't lesser. This is a little-known secret to many, but the quality of schools is not that different across our city. It's that our kids are carrying in a lot of baggage into those classrooms. Sometimes the baggage comes in terms of hunger, of sleep, of having to walk by someone who was drunken on the street. We've heard the worst kinds of stories about what kind of baggage kids are carrying into the classroom. And then we ask a teacher to figure out how exactly can we help them learn when they have so much filling up their brains. That's why we partner with every single child by being an additional adult in the child's classroom and by contributing to ensuring that that kid's baggage that they're carrying into the classroom becomes a little bit lighter every single day by partnering with their families to secure better housing, better food access, stronger economic opportunities, and we're working in the neighborhood to see what we can do to make Jacobsville a brighter place. We work holistically and we work comprehensively all around a child's chance of moving up in the income bracket one day through an education. I want to share some stories about how that's working. So I've got 4 stories, and I'm hoping that I've got enough time here to move through those stories. What we have learned over and over again is as much as you want to build big programs, it comes down to the one-on-one interaction. And so I want to first begin with that picture on the bottom left-hand corner. It's my colleague, Tom Moore, who many of you may know. Tom is our Chief Advancement Officer, and more than our Chief Advancement Officer, he's actually a Dream Center mentor. He went through the process of getting certified, getting trained, and being equipped to provide high-quality youth mentoring to our young man, Zeke there. Zeke doesn't actually have a male figure in his life. His mother and his grandmother have done an amazing job at raising a gentleman, raising someone who has love and kindness in their heart and who hopes big for their life. But we do see that Zeke longs for a father figure. And while there's no replacing that, Tom has been someone to him that Zeke always dreamed of. And what I love about their story is we couldn't get Zeke to open up for anything. We couldn't get Zeke to tell us his story. We couldn't get Zeke to get excited about partnering with us. His family was, but Zeke needed something. And it wasn't until someone saw what Zeke needed and began to put in the work of going to the Lego Fest this past weekend, taking him to baseball games, building Legos with him on the weekends, taking him on walks in the mall, going grocery shopping. Zeke began to feel seen. He began to feel loved and to become known. And now Zeke can't help but open up. He can't help but be excited to share his story. And it's not just having impact in his interpersonal relationships. He's showing up to class excited to learn. He's showing up to class telling his teachers and his student success coaches what he needs for the day. Zeke is becoming the type of person who can say out loud, this is what I want, and this is what I need, and this is where I'm at. When this was a young man who couldn't make eye contact a year ago, this was a young man who couldn't speak out loud. It's through the partnership of just one relationship that his life is being radically transformed, and the trajectory of his life is completely different than it was just a year ago. Above is a partnership we've built with a family. The mom's name is Melissa. Melissa, if you know the Jakesville neighborhood, she's a very well-known person in our neighborhood, and I share her story because it is a story of strength. I've known Melissa for almost 10 years now, and the thing I've always known about Melissa is she loves her children and she loves her neighborhood, and she has done everything she can to fight for them. I'm sharing her story because we have tried walking alongside her for over a decade, not knowing exactly the best way to support her because she was so amazing at self-reliance. It wasn't until we were able to help her find a way to advance her education at Ivy Tech where she was able to get a degree and move up in her income. And she now is working full-time in the nonprofit industry, helping families escape poverty and to break down systems that are barriers for their own flourishing. Melissa's children are thriving in school because Melissa is thriving in her own personal life because of the safe, loving work of someone who could walk alongside her for over a decade. I'm going to move past that top right story, and I want to move to the bottom story because I think this really signifies where I think the call for us is. It all comes back down to the child. So this is actually our Eaglets program, and why I share this story is this is our inaugural class of what we call our Eaglets program. So if you come back here real quick with me, you'll notice that the very first part of our step is something we call Strong Starts in Eaglets. These are kids who are 4 or 5 and they're trying to figure out how they're going to prepare for school. They often haven't accessed preschool. These students actually are part of a larger group now where since they were in preschool and kindergarten, they have now been assessed on the state standard as second graders. And alongside the 3rd grade class, they took something called the I Read 3 test, which is the state standard test for 3rd grade reading. I'm so grateful to say that for the very first time, all of our 3rd graders and 2nd graders passed the I Read 3 test. Why that's amazing is because our floor was only about 10 to 15% were ever passing that test. It's because we started early, because we partnered with them like we did alongside Melissa's family, because we walked alongside students with mentoring, with out-of-school care, with in-school support, with neighborhood revitalization, the full scope of what everything a child would need, we're now seeing that our kids are making it and achieving. I'm going to ask Pat Heck to come up here in just a moment because I think Pat wants to share a little bit about what's coming from his heart as an advocate for Dream Center. But what I want to leave you with is this. There are 14,000 children living below poverty in the Evansville metro area, all 5 counties. About 9 to 10% of those kids live in the Jakesville neighborhood. We are trying to have impact in the life of Zeke. We're trying to have impact in the lives of Tori, who is another student up there. We want to have that individual impact, and we're hoping it's going to be neighborhood impact. But what we realize is if we're successful, we don't just change lives, we don't just change a neighborhood, but we change a region forever. We change a region with hundreds of families, thousands of families who begin to be able to contribute and spread what I think is the Rotarian way of spreading peace and spreading prosperity and flourishing. We believe so strongly that if we can do our work well, generations will thrive, neighborhood after neighborhood. That's why our invitation to you is this. We want to see our community be one where every child is surrounded by a person, an adult who believes in their potential. We think at Dream Center that's a really excellent place for you to come learn how to do that with some systems and some skills and some resources at your disposal. But we believe that that's the call of faith for our community today, that we should feel unrestful by the things that our children are facing in our own community. We should feel a sense of urgency and a sense of demand that something be done. And I'm here to tell you something is being done, and we invite you into it. I'm going to invite Pat to conclude us, but again, thank you.
One of the things I'll first say is that the mouthful that Marcia had to share on John's resume really is kind of a disservice, because what it doesn't point out is the heart that he has for these kids. And if you ever come to an event where our kids are there and John is there, you will see firsthand how John interacts with those kids and those families and how they love him and how he loves them. Wasn't expecting that. So the reason I got involved is because I started learning more about kids growing up in poverty and the impact it has on them through a company I started in 2016-17 as part of me working at Lieberman Technologies, and we had a program called PBIS Rewards, which was used by schools all across the country. Our biggest customer was usually urban schools that had a high poverty rate. Most of the schools would have 100% free and reduced lunch rate. And it was a lot of fun seeing how we could come in, help put some things in place and some systems in place to help with behavioral health that would completely change the climate and culture of the school. And then COVID came along. And COVID was an eye-opener because kids all of a sudden, if they were doing school, it was via Zoom. And what Zoom did was give us a view into their homes that we had never seen before. And you start understanding just how impossible these kids have it. And it was about that time that I and my wife started supporting the Dream Center. In January, we were asked to serve on the board, and so we were both excited about that opportunity. But I will tell you that one of the things that is clear to me is that I am convinced, as a person of faith, that it is God's hand at work that has given us this opportunity to speak to you today, because it was literally almost the day that I was asked to step in as the interim executive director because of financial hardships we're going through right now, that we were given the opportunity. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that we'd ask some of you to consider partnering with us in significant ways so that we can continue to stand in the gap for these kids and come alongside us and be someone who stands in the gap for these kids, because they deserve it. So I'm going to be around. I don't want to take up any more time. I know I want to be respectful, but I would love to share more about our heart for these kids in Jacobsville especially, and more about how I got involved and how you can be involved as well. So thank you. So Pete, do I turn it back over to you?
Yeah, do we have any questions?
Fantastic. Please do ask questions. And John will answer most of these, by the way.
You inferred in the beginning something about the Promised Neighborhood. How does your program fit into the total program of the Promised Neighborhood?
That's a really great question. So actually, I'll try to share this context. The Promised Neighborhood came about as a federal policy initiative under the Obama administration. It was designed to replicate a program out of Harlem, New York, called the Harlem Children's Zone. And the Obama administration said, this is working, this is great. Back in 2017, through the partnership with the Dunnigan family, and I believe, I want to say the Evansville Public Library, Dream Center actually led EVSC and a couple other community partners to the Harlem Children's Zone to go through their week-long Practitioners Institute. We learned how to do that work, and in 2018, we launched what we called the Promise Pathway here. It just so turned out that the Department of Education had a funding model that said, we want to fund communities that are aligning their services around early childhood, around elementary services, around middle and high school services, that also weave in family supports and neighborhood supports. And it's called the Promise Neighborhoods. And so they have 10 goals, and it just so happens that the 10 goals perfectly align up with that. And so we would like to say that if Promise neighborhoods had to shrink all the way down to just one neighborhood, not the, I think, 13 census tracts they're in. Dream Center is providing everything that program asks for. In its partnership with EVSC, partnership with Ronald McDonald Mobile Care Mobile, and some other partners, we provide everything that's being asked for. So we are serving about a quarter of the kids, I believe, that are inside the Promise neighborhoods through the Jakesville Initiative.
Sounds like you're doing some really fantastic work, and I would encourage you to keep growing and keep expanding it. A question I have for you relates to this aspect of it, though. After several years of volunteer work at Title I schools, I've come to believe that there are no bad schools in Evansville and very few bad teachers, but many underperforming, unengaged, uninterested parents. And that's the root of our problems, and you're doing a lot to supplement, to fill in, but what are you doing to get the parents more engaged?
That's a really big question, and I completely resonate that I don't see a major difference between the schools in terms of great educators are going into those schools, great administrators, very, very great resources, great curriculum. It's all very comparable, is my professional opinion. I do feel like there is a challenge in your question, and so I'll answer it, and I'll also add this challenge back to us. In the national work that I got to do, I found that over and over again, families that struggled with income, families that may have come from particular neighborhoods or racial or ethnic backgrounds often had the hardest time accessing the education system. What that told me was there wasn't a problem with the people those systems were trying to serve. There was a problem with the way those systems were designed, because they kept getting the same results over and over again everywhere it went. And so I think that Dream Center has a responsibility on two fronts: how to make the systems of education more accessible for those who have a lot of barriers, and how can we also help families jump over those barriers. And so we hire what we call two different things. We call them economic mobility specialists and wraparound care specialists. Those two different groups are really just case managers who walk arm in arm with a family and say, how can I help you cross these barriers so you can do what you want to do for your kids? And so that means restoring hope for those parents and families. That means helping them dream again. That's not an easy thing to do when you've been beaten down in life, when you feel like things aren't for you. We do everything we can to help families jump those barriers, but we also do everything we can to break those barriers down. Yeah, thank you, Jim.
Hi there. So I know you talked a lot about the goals of the different programs, and that there's also a range of ages that are represented in the types of, or in the kids that you work with. But can you tell us a little bit about just kind of what the programs look like in terms of how the kids are spending their time and what activities they're doing at the Dream Center, and kind of how you are engaging with them?
Absolutely. And thank you for that, because we do have quite a few programs going on across 0 to 22 years of age. So right now we're in summer program. So our kids today are doing a couple big things. So they'll spend the morning in STEM-based enrichment clubs. So we have one that's called Mythbusters. And so they are learning different scientific myths and seeing what they can do with the scientific method to disprove those myths, which has been a really fun way to engage them in literacy and in mathematics and just to have fun. I think one of them was something to do with can you actually have an egg hatch with the right conditions. I think that is going to be found to not be true. We'll just have rotten eggs. Then they'll go swimming, so they have swimming lessons this afternoon, so they'll get that fitness in. They will also get to participate in trips to UE and USI this summer. So they will have a very immersive education experience this summer, because the goal is by the time they get back to school, they haven't had any sort of slide as it relates to where they were at whenever they left school. In the meantime, I have teams who are regularly meeting with families right now to make sure that the utilities aren't going to be too hard, because a lot of the families live in substandard housing where maybe the electric bill is going to be more like $800 or $900 a month rather than the typical $2 or $3 that's common for them, because that AC is really running. And we are deploying at many different levels, but the kids are really running in that out-of-school program summer experience right now. Yeah, thank you.
Hello there. Thank you so much for the work that you both do. I'm curious about your metrics for success and some of your data points. Could you share with us just some data on your success in the different programs, whether it's the family pathways or the student pathways?
Absolutely. So I'll just share two big ideas because there's quite a few things that we dive into. I would refer you to, I'm also on the board of an organization that's partnered really closely with Dream Center to facilitate this very conversation. We created something we call the State of the City Report that looks at 7 cradle to career outcomes. So that's kindergarten readiness and 3rd grade reading. And we explain why is this a really important benchmark and why should we track it and how are we doing as a community. And I'll share with you what Dream Center is finding that is we are gaining on those 7 cradle to career outcomes. High school graduation, post-secondary enrollment, those sorts of things. The two I want to share with you, though, is the first I'll start with the family. We have found using something we call it's called the Bridge to Self-Sufficiency. It's a rubric that asks, how's a family doing in housing, income, transportation, all those sorts of domains of life, and we put it down to just one small number. And we have found that if a family walks with us for about 24 months, we can take them from what is normally an in crisis or at-risk status up to a safe or stable status 90% of the time. So after 24 months, we have a 90% success rate of moving families up to a safe or stable status, which we're hoping to get to 100%, but we're finding that sometimes the holes that families are in is a longer runway than 2 years. But we've been so grateful to see that kind of success happen. For our kids, the number one thing we'd say is after 4 semesters, we have found that kids on average of about 80% of the time will move up a single letter grade in their in-class performance. So after 2 full school years, we'll move them up in a letter grade of performance, which I'm not sure how that feels to the room, but I will tell you this, in a world where every single state in the US saw a decline in mathematics during 2020, the fact that we are seeing progressive growth in this population is a really big deal to us. And so prior to COVID, it was more like 2-letter grades, so we're trying to regain that. But those are sort of some things that we look at regularly. Yeah.
One more question right here.
John, one of the things, whenever I was learning more about what you guys are doing there at Dream Center, that really spoke to me is, and coming back to the question about the parental involvement, a lot of times when families are in poverty and living below a living wage, there are just certain habits and thought processes that are just maybe second nature to some of us in terms of problem solving and things like that aren't for them. And the way that you come alongside and help people learn to fish rather than just giving them a fish, if that makes sense, and how to work through problems. Can you speak a little bit about that to the audience, to getting back to that whole parental involvement piece and the family piece?
Oh yeah, that's such a good question. And something you may be interested in, out of Boston College, there's a group called the Economic Mobility Pathways, and they figured out how to take brain science and poverty work and bring them together, because what they realized was, if I'm going to take steps towards trying to get out of poverty, that is more a neurological decision than it is a budget decision or a logical decision. I have to feel dissatisfied with my life, and I have to feel the courage to say, I deserve more. One story I like to share is a mom who I walked with her for about 3 or 4 years. She was in and out of homeless shelters all of her childhood. When I met her, she had her first home, and in that home, there was a basement, and when I went down there, I found that the sewage line actually was corroded, and she had a bucket underneath the sewage line. And I don't need to be more graphic than that, but when I asked her why she was putting up with it, she goes, well, I have a house. What more can I ask for? And it alerted me that she felt that this was the best that she deserved, and to advocate for herself was terrifying. It scared her because she thought she would lose her home. It was so terrifying to her what might happen to her if she just advocated for that next step of dignity. It wasn't until we helped her feel that dignity and self-worth that she was able to put her hand up and say, I deserve better, and I'm not afraid of what that person might try to do to me. And that took a long time to get her to feel that kind of safety. And so it's a long process of making people feel safe to advocate for themselves, because the barriers, they work because they're scary. Yeah.
Thank you again, John
Yeah,
and
thank
Pat,
you.
for the great work that you do. Thank you.